Eidolons, spectral fragments that roam the plains at night. There are Tenno that can just survive their brutal onslaughts. Then, there are the brave Tenno that hunt these fractured sentients. Will you be among them?
Okay, they're not actually that bad once you learn how to take them down, so let's go over that. Disclaimer, I am not an expert in Eidolon hunts. This video is geared more towards players new to Eidolon hunting, though it may have some more advanced tips. Players can prepare for Eidolons in any way they wish to. This is simply a mechanics guide and some additional optimization tips. In no way are those tips required. Before successfully contributing to hunting your first Eidolon, you may have experienced little to no damage, confusion, and in extreme cases, death. To avoid this, we'll learn the mechanics of the Eidolon hunts. Firstly, spoiler alert, you should complete the war within quest to unlock something that is necessary to begin damaging an Eidolon. Definitely do that before proceeding. There are 3 Eidolons that you can hunt in a row on the plains of Eidolon. The first is the Terrylyst, the second is the Gantulyst, the third is the Hydrolyst. The Terrylyst, also known as Terry, is the least challenging with fewer mechanics. I recommend practicing your knowledge on this Eidolon. If you run up to Terry, you might get smacked. More importantly, you may realize your guns and melee weapons do no damage. This is because Terry, like the next 2 Eidolons, all have a shield. This shield can only be damaged in operator form by pressing the 5 key on your keyboard for default PC keybinds. Then you shoot the Eidolon while in your operator form. You'll notice a purple shield that will begin to dwindle. Once it is completely gone, you can go back to Warframe form by pressing the 5 key again, and shoot at specific points on the Terrylyst. These specific points are known as Synovia, though most players call them limbs. Terry has a total of 4 limbs, 2 on the arms and 2 on the kneecaps. The next 2 Eidolons will have 6 limbs. But focusing on Terry for now, after you take out a limb, you'll hear the Eidolon scream and see it kneel. It will then pulse with waves of magnetic energy that can do a ton of damage. For beginners, I recommend going back into operator form and holding the control key to go into void form. In this form, you are invulnerable to damage. However, you can still get knocked back sometimes. After the Eidolon is done pulsing and screaming, you may notice that it sinks back into the ground and disappears, or it will stay and regenerate its shield, which you'll have to break again in operator form. These 2 outcomes depend on whether you have a charged lure. Eidolon Lures are Grineer inventions that are scattered across the plains. Normally they spawn at Grineer camps. To obtain one, you'll have to shoot it until it loses all of its health. Then you walk up to it, towards the bottom, and press X to hack it. After hacking it, the lure should follow you around the map. You will note that if you look at the lure, there is a yellow shield icon above it. This indicates that the lure is not charged. This is where the next mechanic of Eidolon hunting is introduced, a Vomvalyst, or Voms for short. Voms are semi-spherical spectral beings that hover above the ground and can be found across the plains. These are used to charge lures. To charge a lure, make sure the lure is near the Vom and connected with an orange-ish line. Then shoot the Vom, and a ball of energy should go into the lure. You need a total of 3 Voms to charge 1 lure. If you have multiple lures, the Voms will still only charge 1 lure at a time. What a charged lure will do is keep the Eidolon from teleporting away after a limb is shot off. Charged lures are also used to capture an Eidolon, such as Terry, instead of killing them. You must capture Terry to be able to move on to the next Eidolon, Garry, and get more loot. To do this, you get enough charged lures to cover each limb that was broken. Since each charged lure covers 2 limbs each, you only need 2 charged lures for the Terrylyst. It should also be noted that sometimes when you're going to break the Eidolon's shield or a limb, they will emit a scream and become invulnerable to every type of attack. To deal with this, look for the blue lines of energy going from the Eidolons to the Voms. This happens with all 3 Eidolons, Terry, Garry, and Harry. Killing Terry means you won't be able to move on to Garry, the second Eidolon. It will have a different animation than the capture of Terry. If you capture Terry, then the loot will be dispensed from the first charged lure that had attached to Terry. Also, the other charged lure will break as well. Every charged lure that captured the Eidolons will break after the capture. Among the loot is a specific kind of Eidolon shard, called a brilliant Eidolon shard. You will need this to summon the next Eidolon, Garry. Once you feel ready to summon Garry, go to the shrine in the middle of the big lake and place your brilliant Eidolon shard by pressing X at the prompt. It may take a moment to appear. All members of your squad will have to do this. If there are 2 people, you need 2 brilliant Eidolon shards. 4 people, and you'll need 4 brilliant Eidolon shards. Garry should spawn somewhere in front of the shrine, and just as before, you can begin taking down their shield with your operator form. The mechanics to take down Garry are the same: shield, limb, etc. But Garry does have some different attacks that have the potential to happen. It will potentially break your lures. Lures do take damage. The ability that has the most likely chance of doing this are large vertical light beams that hurt a ton. Avoid them if possible. The Gantulyst, Garry, has 6 limbs and will need 3 charged lures to successfully capture it. As before, killing Garry means you won't be able to move on to the Hydrolyst, also known as Harry. If you capture Garry, you will pick up a radiant Eidolon shard and bring it to the same shrine you were at to summon the last Eidolon. Press X at the prompt when ready to summon the Hydrolyst. The Hydrolyst is the same process as the last 2 Eidolons. Additional attacks include lightning strikes and toxic rain and puddles. Avoid them if possible. The Hydrolyst is less likely to break your lures than Garry was. During the Hydrolyst, you may spot a pink energy orb with lines going to the Voms, making the Voms invulnerable. Take out the pink orb in operator form, then the Voms can be damaged again. The Hydrolyst has 6 limbs and will need 3 charged lures to successfully capture it. After all 3 are captured, you can call it a run, and reset the map by leaving the plains and going back in for another. On to optimization. As said before, these will be short and quick tips that I found to be useful. They are in no way required. I also want to note that there is an Eidolon hunting community within the larger Warframe community. A lot of it is about speedrunning. If you're interested in that, I suggest looking for some creators on Twitch or YouTube that have more information. Tip number 1. Madurai is a great focus goal to begin Eidolon hunting. Specifically, Madurai has a node called Void Strike. It consumes all of your operator energy in order to increase your damage by a percentage for how much energy was consumed. This makes shield breaking a breeze. Tip number 2. Speaking of shield breaking, I found that increasing your standing with the quills in Cetus's cave and getting a custom amp will help you take down Eidolons faster. Amps are categorized in the number range of 1 through 7, the order at which you unlock the amps normally. There are 3 parts to an amp: the prism, your primary fire, the scaffold, your alt fire, and the brace, an extra bonus to your amp. If I wanted to build a 4-6-2 amp, the parts I'd use are Ron Prism, D6 Scaffold, and Jutney Brace, as an example. The 1-2-3 amp seems to work well for Eidolons for beginner Eidolon hunters. However, if you also want to progress Vox Solara, Standing, and Fortuna, you can get a 1-7-7 amp or a 7-7-7 amp. Tip number 3. Some popular Warframes for hunting Eidolons are Bolt and Trinity. You can hunt with any Warframe, but the community finds Volts to be the fastest, though usually when using Volt you have a semi-specific build if you want to speedrun. Trinity is all about damage reduction and keeping your lures alive. Tip number 4. Popular weapons seem to include the Rubico Prime, Zenith, Vastalok, and the Nell. Again, these weapons have semi-specific builds for speedrunning. One thing I'll note is that Eidolons are weak to radiation damage. Tip number 5. Gear that makes running Eidolons a bit smoother include Ciphers, to hack the lures instantly, Arcwing Launcher, to get around 10 times quicker, Large Squad Energy Resource, these can be found in your clan energy labs, and a crewmate summon to kill Voms. This requires some Railjack intrinsic leveling. Tip number 6. Forcing Vomvalyst spawns is done by going to one of several specific locations. I'll show you 3 in this video that I use. Then you aim at another specific location and creep forward until you see the Vom spawn. This is a lot easier than searching the entire map for them. Tip number 7. Terms and Acronyms. You may hear about or see several terms and acronyms being used when it comes to Eidolon hunting, for example, VS or DPS. VS is a Void Strike build used for breaking shields, and DPS is much like the VS's other half. They break the limbs and manage most of the lures. Eidolon runs per night are often seen as a 5x3 plus a number, or even a 6x3. Eidolons only spawn during night, so this shows how many runs someone wants to do. In the case of a 5x3 plus 1, it would be 5 runs of capturing all 3 Eidolons, plus 1 extra Eidolon, which would be the first Eidolon in the sequence, Terry. Tridolon is a common term, which just means that you capture all 3 Eidolons. That is all for the information of this video. Thank you for hanging out. I stream on Twitch at twitch.tv/jinxok almost every day at 2 p.m. MST and have a small Discord community that you can join if you have more questions about Eidolons or Warframe in general. Good luck on your hunts.